This is a special message and a very warm Irish welcome to my slightly and slowly growing following in the United States. We have a lot in common between the United States and the Republic of Ireland because both of our countries came out of bloodshed in which brave men laid down their lives because they weren't happy with the situation they found themselves in. What the founding fathers of the Republic of Ireland and the founding fathers of the United States of America had absolutely in common was their desire to create, above all else, a republic, and to get away from the tyrannising and stifling and choking effects of the British Crown. Irish independence happened in 1922, American independence happened in 1776, so there's a gap of about 150 years between them. It's interesting to view how the relationship with Britain changed between these two newly independent republics in that space of 150 years, and how the crown in Britain evolved away from being an active crown, which was causing a lot of trouble, to being a far less active crown. But it doesn't actually change the fact that both entities, the Republic of Ireland and the United States, wanted to get away. Moreover, they wanted to create their own rules and they wanted to create a republic. What creating a republic means in practice, and certainly was very much at the heart of the sentiment of the founding fathers of both of those republics, was a realisation that you have to have a government, but that government is also an evil. So you have to put a government in place, because otherwise you'd have lawlessness. But once you put that government in place, then you have to recognise that the people deserve to be protected from it and not by it. We have drifted away from that in Ireland. We are also seeing the United States drifting away from that. It is a damn shame that Donald Trump has not got a second term as president. Personally, coming from Ireland, I would urge him strongly not to run again in 2024. The reason for that, quoting one of his own books, is losing your momentum. Absolutely, he will lose his momentum. He was an outstanding president for the 4 years that he was in. I believe that he deserved to get a second term. I was very surprised at the turn of events on the 6th of January because I thought that right up to the very end, Joe Biden would concede. I think it's apparent to anybody who's not delusional or telling lies to themselves or others that Joe Biden is in no way fit to occupy the presidency of the United States. There are many reasons for that. At the moment, he is incapacitated, arising from what's obviously cognitive impairment coming from senile dementia. But leaving that aside, if one looks closer at Biden's personal behaviour towards others, including women, and Biden's track record as a politician, that's not a person who's suitable to be running the United States of America at any particular time, or particularly this. One of the big slogans that Biden has been peddling is Build Back Better. If you take even a cursory glance at what Build Back Better is about, it is unprecedented. It is an effort to socialise private business to an extent that has never been seen before in the world. The economy of the United States collapsed around 1930. And what happened was Franklin Roosevelt, the then president, brought in the New Deal. What Biden is proposing is 1,000 times more intrusive and extensive than the New Deal. Something similar appears to be happening here in Ireland. But the distinction is that in Ireland we still have a large populace who seem to think that the government is on their side. This is despite the glaring evidence of at least the past 10 years that would tell anybody who's looking at it objectively that they're not. Whether it's the United States of America or whether it's the Republic of Ireland, what small to medium business holders need is a tax break. You give them a tax break, they can look after themselves. But no, that's not what's proposed. In Ireland, what they're proposing are task forces, I put that in inverted commas, to give state subsidy to businesses that were ruined during the COVID-19 thing. This video is not designed to talk about whether or not COVID-19 is or is not a hoax. But the reality is, whether it's a hoax or not, there has been a devastating effect on small to medium-sized private businesses in Ireland. I assume that the same has happened in the United States of America, and that's not even counting in the damage done by Black Lives Matter. on the riots that happened all through 2020, which saw so many small to medium businesses in specific parts of the United States being targeted. This has devastated an entire class of people. It is appalling what has happened to them, and it's irreparable. So the notion then that the state is going to come in and I say the state meaning the federal government of the US, not the individual states, that they're going to just come in and wave a magic wand and sort it all out, that's sinister. Because what's going to happen is they're going to be writing these big paychecks, but they're not going to be writing them for everybody. They're going to be writing them for people who get government approval. The same is going to happen here in Ireland. They're talking about task forces, which is in effect another non-governmental organisation, or an NGO as we call them. They will be an NGO designed to decide who gets government approval to stay in business. So that is a socialisation of private commerce. What they need in Ireland is a 5-year, at least, tax break. And I mean a total tax break. A break from having to pay tax for their staff, a break from having to pay corporate tax and all of this. The people who work for them should also get a tax break. Ireland, a country with a population of about 4 million, spends 5,000 million euros a year on NGOs. We won't even need to comment on what these NGOs are about now. But we don't need to spend that money on those, and if we can spend it on them, then rather than that, we can give these small to medium-sized private businesses a tax break. Cut out the NGOs, there's your tax break. I assume something similar is happening in the United States. Biden and our present leadership in Dublin, who you don't need to be bothered with, are not that way inclined. That is because, one, they're psychotic, and two, because they want to take control of as much as possible. Donald Trump was such a good president, but I think he was too good for these kinds, and they had their story ready for this particular presidential election in the United States in 2020. Americans may not be aware that we had a general election here in Ireland in 2020 as well. The people very much seemed not to want the present governmental crowd in, but what they got was everybody back in, squared. This is an affront to democracy, and it's actually a gaslight. It's trying to tell people, well, your vote doesn't count. The same is happening in the United States, but in a different way. I thought right up to the end that Biden would concede, and that he would then try and take the high moral ground and say it was in the national interest to do so. I was amazed that they went the full 9 yards with Trump. I was amazed at that. So then it had to go to a congressional vote, and the congressional vote, in my opinion, if I know the US constitutional right, Congress could have vetoed Biden and put Trump back in. There was a lot to say for that, because first of all, although Trump was not really able to make a case in court regarding fraud, and I won't speculate about the nature of those cases, something was wrong. The notion that a candidate like Biden, who could hardly attract 25 to 30 people to one of his rallies, where Trump was still attracting tens of thousands, that candidate would get the highest popular vote and the highest electoral college vote in either history or at least a very long time, frankly doesn't bear out from the evidence that we saw. Something is wrong here. But in my opinion, what was pulled off on this occasion is much bigger than being able to say, well, you could pin to the electoral college votes of Pennsylvania or Georgia or whatever. So they knew what they were doing, and they were very committed to making sure that Trump did not get his second term. Well, there you go, he didn't get his second term. There was nothing on Donald Trump. They had no dirt on him, because if they had, they'd have brought it out in the past 4 years. A lot of people who don't know how it works think the word impeach means that Trump has immediately been condemned. And impeachment isn't itself a finding. It's merely a removal of congressional or presidential privilege to allow the person who's been impeached, or to actually force the person who's been impeached to answer questions under oath in Congress. Whether or not they'll be able to do this after Trump leaves office in 2 days is another question altogether, but it proves the vindictiveness of the likes of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. What is now happening is that neoliberalism and globalism is taking over the United States. It happened to us here long ago. These are psychotic philosophies, globalism and neoliberalism. They've caused terrible, terrible damage. They've caused as much damage, really, in the long term in their own way as fascism or communism could be said to have done. Donald Trump was the last honest president of the United States after Kennedy, and look what happened to Kennedy. When Eisenhower was in the final days of his 8-year term, Eisenhower warned Kennedy and made sure others knew to beware of the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower was right. Kennedy paid for it. This is what Trump was getting at as well. Trump was generous, he was courteous, he was articulate, he was clever. He didn't use those horrible buzzwords or lingo that so many professional politicians use. He was straight-spoken. He did not commit any United States soldier to any new conflict, and he was the first president since Eisenhower not to do that. Of course they're not going to want him round. Of course they're not going to want him round. In terms of Ireland, Donald Trump has received nothing but vilification from the mainstream media here in Ireland. It is shameful, it is embarrassing to see the level of abuse Donald Trump gets from the Irish mainstream media. One of the differences between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is that Donald Trump created employment here in Ireland. With Doonbeg, he bought that Gulf estate and he employed people there. He owns property here in Ireland. He employed Irish people. Joe Biden has done none of those things, but the Irish mainstream media behaves with a sycophancy that personally I find nauseating towards Biden. Whereas all they do is criticise and lie about Trump. Then the mainstream media here in Ireland wonder why people are turning against them to the stage that they have to put out these slick, glossy advertisements telling us all why we're wrong. No, we're not wrong. We're right. You're the ones who are wrong. You're the ones who are telling lies. I could give another hour talking about the various specific instances where I've identified the Irish mainstream media telling lies. And I would qualify that by saying that I know enough about media to know that journalists sometimes make mistakes. That's part of the job. That's part of the risk of being a journalist. Sometimes you make mistakes. No, I mean lies. Lies on behalf of the Irish government to protect them. At the moment, our Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, I was just about to say our Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, that was a Freudian slip. Our former Taoiseach and present Taoiseach, which is Deputy Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, has openly admitted to interfering in 2 public selections that happened in this state. Before then, he was Minister for Health and then became Taoiseach or Prime Minister and oversaw the single most corrupt and expensive misappropriation of public funds in Irish history, a children's hospital in the centre of Dublin. He's got off scot-free. Nothing's happened to him. He hasn't been indicted. He hasn't been charged. This goes to show that the mainstream media work with vested interests in government, particularly if they're globalist and neoliberal, to protect them from being prosecuted as criminals. Leo Varadkar, our former Taoiseach and present Taoiseach or Deputy Taoiseach, is a criminal. He has threatened on Twitter to sue people who are saying things that he finds upsetting. But I'll say it and he can sue me if he wants to. Leo Varadkar is a criminal. And he has been involved directly in corrupt planning and public procurement processes in this country. I hope he hears this and I really hope he sues me. And I mean that because that will be defended to the last limit. Rather like the United States, we have very open courts here. We don't have videography in courts yet, although we should. But, and distinct from Britain, we operate an open court system here. Constitutionally, we're obliged to have open courts. So I hope he sues me. That'll be done in open court. He won't sue me because he's a loudmouth and a bully and he's ultimately a man of straw. Politically, intellectually, he's a man of straw. Donald Trump is none of those things. If you read his books, if you listen to his quotations, Donald Trump came out with lots of very serious and substantial remarks. Donald Trump also empathised with people and he empathised with humans. When Trump said America first, he didn't mean that he wanted to kind of declare war on the rest of the world. What he meant was the people of any country are entitled to set their own agenda. They still have to deal with the rest of the world. They still have to do business and interact. But America first was meaning that we're not going to apologise for being Americans. I wish somebody would come out with Ireland first. Why should we apologise? We created our own country. We're the natives of this country. We weren't even white settlers who came to North America. We're the natives of Ireland. Yet all the time we're being called upon to apologise for everything we're doing and being told we're racist. That's by the NGOs. So Trump, whether he was aware of it or not, he had the back of people like us who aren't willing to apologise. I feel very grateful to Donald Trump for everything he did, both in his pre-election campaign in 2016 and the effort that he put in for the 4 years that he was US President. I feel personally very grateful to him for everything he did. I extend my sincere thanks to him and to his family for everything that they did. I do believe very sincerely that a time will come when they will be vindicated, and when people will realise, or when a large quorum of people will realise what us out here have always known, that he was a good man who was doing his best. Maybe he is narcissistic, but maybe he has a big opinion of himself, but in fact that's positive, because he did not wish to be perceived as a failed president. So that's what puts the effort behind a person to do good and to do well and to be seen to do well. That's distinct from being a do-gooder like our present Taoiseach Micheál Martin. He's a do-gooder, but in fact he's weak, he's incompetent, he's indecisive, he's vindictive. Donald Trump is none of those things. But then in Europe, again, in highly centralised states like Ireland, they don't realise that the United States of America is a federation of 50 states. Then add on DC, then add on the other territories. There are 50 states in the United States of America. Are they going to tolerate Joe Biden telling them that they have to take on a socialist market? No, they're not going to. This is rubbish that the Democrats are coming out with. It's rubbish being amplified by their pals in mainstream media. Well, we have that here. Our government comes out with rubbish being amplified by their pals in mainstream media. We have a lot in common. I feel your pain. But independent states like Texas and, Arkansas, those very, very Wyoming, places, South Dakota, they're not going to be dictated to by Joe Biden. They're going to set their own agenda. People in Europe don't realise, okay, the Civil War happened, but the states of the US are still incredibly independent in relation to one another and in relation to the rest of the world. They're not going to have that level of independence stolen from them on principle, but particularly in what we're witnessing as a socialisation of their economies. They're not going to have it. States that are Democratic basket cases like California, they're beyond rescue anyway. California is collapsing. If you look at California, its infrastructure and its day-to-day living, particularly in the urban areas of California, is coming unstuck. So how they're going to respond to this, who knows? But this is just Democratic gaslighting and nonsense that they're coming out with that, will be torn apart within a week of Biden taking over the presidency. I believe something else. I posted this on Twitter. I've posted this elsewhere. I believe that within a very, very short period of time after Biden takes over, a very large amount of American people will be clamouring for Donald Trump to return. They still are. And what's happening is wrong with Biden. And even his most depraved cheerleaders in the mainstream media, they know that as well. This is not right. What has happened here is wrong. There's hardly any enthusiasm for Biden anywhere, except particularly cringe-making people in the left wing of the Irish media. But that's the Orange Man Bad paradigm that they're going on with. I had a previous video, Orange Man Gone, and this is it, you see. Trump isn't going to be president in 2 or 3 days from now. So what are they going to do? Who are they going to blame now? There's going to be a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president. So they'd better make everything absolutely rosy in a week. And if they don't, they're to blame for it. But I'm digressing. I don't want to hold you too long here. Both the United States of America and the Republic of Ireland have constitutions and an ethos based on a desire of individual citizens to be free from tyrannical government. We're coming back to that again. We're coming back to tyrannical governments and a desire on the part of the people to be free of these, to make our own decisions, to obey the law, to look after ourselves, to respect those around us. Ultimately, the money runs out anyway, and these things are always about money. So it can't last. The present situation simply cannot last. Whether it should or should not, irrespective of the morality, it cannot last. I'll wind up by wishing the very best to all my friends and to all the Trump supporters anywhere in the world, but particularly in the United States of America. Our countries are based upon a desire for freedom and a desire for individual respect of ourselves and others. We will get through this. This will pass. I don't think Trump will return to the presidency. More's the pity. But I don't think, if I know Donald Trump well enough, that he will go out quietly. So God bless America and God bless Ireland, and we will talk again very soon in better times.